Irenaeus, who died in 202 AD. So he's really a 2nd century, early 3rd century scholar, patristic writer. Juniper Carroll says, you know what? We've looked at this and we just don't find anything compelling in Irenaeus to say that he held to Mary's perpetual virginity. So there's some who say that Origen, and he's also 2nd century, mid 3rd century. So I would guess that his writings are all from really the 3rd century, since he was born in 185. But he has been brought forth as evidence that Mary didn't have any other children after Jesus. And what's interesting here is that he draws on apocryphal works. And apocryphal are basically works that are not received in the canon of the scriptures, are not recognized by anybody as canonical. And they are, in this case, we're talking about the Gospel according to Peter and the Proto-Evangelium of James. And this is something that's very interesting. This is Origen in his commentary on Matthew, book 10, chapter 17. And he appeals to the Gospel according to Peter and the book of James, or the Proto-Evangelium of James, to support the theory that the brethren of Jesus were actually sons of Joseph by a former marriage. And the story here is that Mary was a consecrated virgin, that she had pledged herself to virginity from an early age, and she knew that she was not going to marry and was not going to know a man. And so Roman Catholics sometimes will fall back on this to say that when Mary said to Gabriel, "How can this be, since I do not know a man?" Into her vow of celibacy. This 3rd century, and he says, but some say, basing it on a tradition in the Gospel according to Peter, as it is entitled, or the book of James, that the brethren of Jesus were sons of Joseph by a former wife whom he married before Mary. And he says that, Origen says, well, I think this is in harmony with reason. And he says, well, it doesn't make sense to me that that Mary would know intercourse with a man after the Holy Ghost came into her. That is, the Holy Ghost had, basically become espoused to her, and therefore she's taken, from, she's off the market, in other words. So it just makes sense that she wouldn't have another, that she wouldn't actually be married and know a man. And Origen says, well, this seems in harmony with reason, but he's still just appealing to tradition and not to recognize scriptures. But we're going to come back to the Proto-Evangelium of James a little bit later, because Juniper Carroll has some things to say about it. But what I want to highlight is that Origen did not believe that Mary's virginity was preserved in childbirth. So even if we have Origen even giving credence, and whatever the words he actually says in his commentary on Matthew are not really emphatic praise of these sources. He just says, well, there's some people that say this, and it seems to me reasonable, but he doesn't convey to this as if it's some received apostolic doctrine. He just says, well, I thought about it, and it seems to make sense. But no sense that he'd actually received this as an apostolic truth. But later in another work, and this is his homilies on Luke, homily 14, paragraph 7 to 8, he actually says that Jesus' birth was normal, and that he says, in the case of every other woman, it is not the birth of an infant, but intercourse with a man that opens the womb. But the womb of the Lord's mother was opened at the time when her offspring was brought forth. So here Origen is saying that what normally would happen to a virgin on her wedding night is what happened to Mary when Christ was born. So he's actually, here Origen is saying that Mary's virginity was compromised in delivery. So even if he believed that maybe Mary didn't have sex after Christ was born, he still believed that his birth was normal and that Mary's womb was opened by his delivery. And that's the very thing that Roman Catholics denied. They would say that her